Had no need to fight tonight.
The 2021-2022 season previews continue today with the Boston Bruins, a team who, well, if you look at them, they're way closer to a cup than they were last season. This team has really taken the big steps in this free agency to get way closer to where, a couple of years ago you were saying, oh, their cup window's closed. Now, it might actually not be. The window is still open, possibly. But we're going to look at their key arrivals, look at their key departures, look at the projected lineup, and ask the question, do they make the playoffs? But first off, if you're new to the channel, you haven't already subscribed, or you're a Bruins fan, I really would appreciate it if you did so. The grind's been unreal. We've been making so much content lately. It would be amazing if you would help me get there. But anyways, I won't waste any more of your time. Let's get into the preview. So last season for the Boston Bruins was, well, a pretty good season when you look at it relatively. They went 33, 16, and 7 for 73 points, and they finished 10th overall in the NHL. Very solid statistics there. Obviously, they were fourth for a little bit. Then they started rising up, started winning games, started earning my respect as a semi-Boston Bruins fan. And then they finished third overall in their division, where they faced the, I'm pretty sure, second seed Washington Capitals, where they beat them in 5 games. It was looking a bit scary there during Game 2. It could have been a 2-0 series lead for Washington, but then Taylor Hall scores the Game 2 overtime winner, and they eventually beat him in 5 games. But they would move on to face off the New York Islanders in the next series, where they lost in 6 games. That's a pretty common rhetoric when you face the New York Islanders. It gets pretty tough at times facing them. It gets pretty competitive. It gets pretty rough. And I mean, that's the Islanders, honestly. That is how they play, and that's how they win. That's how they move on. And that's how they made it to the conference finals 2 years in a row. Now, it's been very consistent seeing Boston lose in the second round, 2018, 2020, and now this year. So if we see it again, this could mean we are stuck at a part where, they're at the Colorado level of my rankings chart. But honestly, I think with the moves they made this offseason, they could very well be closer to a cup than we think. Looking at their key departures here for your Boston Bruins, you have a lot of names here. And I mean, with teams that make big off seasons trying to get closer to a cup, that's kind of how it goes. They lost David Krejci off to Europe. He wanted to go play in the Czech Republic. That was obviously an issue with him. He'll definitely be missed on that second-line center role, absolutely. And then basically their entire goaltending got revamped. Basically the entire thing. They lost Tuukka Rask. Of course, he's currently an FA right now. It's still possible that he comes back to Boston, but right now he has not signed a contract, so he is currently a free agent. They also lost Yaroslav Halak. Of course, he's gone over and signed with the Vancouver Canucks. I've always liked Halak. I think he's a solid backup, and I think he's going to do great with Demko. But obviously, with the moves Boston wanted to make, they obviously had to move on from him. They also lost Nick Ritchie, and it's been very critical on what some people think of Ritchie. People think Ritchie's fat. People think Ritchie just can't score, can't skate. He's only good for hitting. Well, I think Ritchie will do solid in Toronto, hopefully. But losing him on Boston is a big hit physical-wise. They also lost a depth center in Sean Corrali. That's definitely going to hurt their roster as well. He went off to Columbus. We talked about them a couple days ago as well. They also lost Jeremy Lauzon, however you want to say it. They lost him to the Seattle Kraken, a very solid defenseman who gets paid good money for what he does. Honestly, he plays pretty well defensively, so he's definitely going to do well in Seattle, but he definitely will be missed on Boston's blue line. Then as well as that, you lost Kevin Miller. Of course, he has also retired as well, so that's unfortunate to see. And then they also lost Andre Kassin, and they also lost as well as that Daniel Vladar to the Calgary Flames. So they lost a couple goalies. They lost a couple forwards. They lost a couple defensemen. They lost a little bit. But, when you make moves like that, you have to gain other things to make this team a much more cup contender. And I think when you look at their acquisitions that they acquired this offseason, I think you can honestly say they are a cup contender. Moving on here into your key arrivals. Now, the biggest problem with Boston was depth. That was always the argument. I've seen it by so many Boston Bruins fans. They were saying, oh, the depth is the biggest problem with this roster and the goaltending. Well, I think they honestly solved both of those problems. They acquired Eric Haula from the Nashville Predators. He's obviously going to be a very solid, probably playing third, maybe fourth line forward for the Bruins, but it's much better than what the depth that they had before, and I think he is going to be very effective. They also acquired Nick Foligno as well from the Toronto Maple Leafs. To get technical, he's probably going to be playing third line, most likely. And honestly, I think he can be a very solid, maybe even top six. He possibly could push Craig Smith out of that top six spot if he's effective on that third line. It's very possible. As well as that, they acquired a fourth line center, and who I think is a very solid, and I have a lot of faith in him, Thomas Nosek. He's coming from Vegas, of course. I think he can be a very solid forward who's definitely going to be playing fourth line minutes, obviously, because the amount of center depth that Boston has now. I think he can be very solid. He's going to win faceoffs. He's solid on the penalty kill, and he can score too. He can score a decent amount of goals, to be honest with you, for a fourth line forward. They also acquired from the Winnipeg Jets Derek Forbort. This is one of the most controversial moves. I'm not too sure how I feel about it. Derek Forbort was kind of just in Winnipeg, in all honesty. So we'll see how he does with Boston. And I mean, honestly, like Forbort, with how weak the Jets' D-core was, I think Boston very well could revive him. But if not, he could be gone. Then they also acquired who you could argue is the biggest acquisition that they got this offseason, Linus Ullmark from the Buffalo Sabres. They've always wanted that starting goaltender. And it's always been criticized like, oh, they need to go out and get someone like Linus Ullmark because Tuukka Rask was just shitting the bed every game. Swayman is just not a starter yet. Halak was just injured, and he wasn't the Halak that he used to be. And I mean, who else is there? Daniel Vladar? Like, Callum Booth? Like, who was going to put this team over the hump? And I think, honestly, Ullmark, I'm not saying he's going to put the team over the hump, but I definitely think that he improves in the goaltending and is going to be probably better than what Tuukka Rask could do. Anyways, now moving on into your projected lineup for your Boston Bruins. You have starting off on the top six, Brad Marchand, Patrice Bergeron, David Pastrnak, now that we got that out of the way, Taylor Hall, Craig Smith, and Charlie Coyle. That is your top six. I like that. I like that a lot. Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak, what else can I say? Dominant line. All those players you can argue are top 20 players in the NHL. Seriously. Bergeron, there's been some talks of whether this could be his last season with Boston. That would suck for their center core, especially if that were to happen, especially because of the impact that he's had on that city. But honestly, I can't imagine that Bergeron doesn't leave Boston. It just feels weird seeing him in a jersey that isn't that. So that's all I'm going to say. Marchand as well. He's really cleaned up his game. He's always referred to as the Rat, but I think he's much more better. He's cleaned up his game more, and you can argue he's even a top 10 player in the NHL. And then Pastrnak, he had a down year goal scoring wise last season, but I think he can definitely bounce back from that, obviously. I mean, last year was just a bad year for a lot of people. It wasn't just him. As well as that, Taylor Hall as well, another guy who is looking for kind of a bounce back season, but I think he's definitely going to get one with Boston. He's been very solid in the games that he played, especially in the playoffs. Craig Smith also has really proved to be a top six center throughout the past couple of years that he's been with Boston. So I'm very excited to see how he's going to do. And then, of course, Charlie Coyle as well. Not a bad second line right wing. And then there you go. As for the bottom six, you have Jake DeBrusk, Nick Foligno, and Chris Wagner. Then you have Eric Haula, Tomas Nosek, and Curtis Lazar. Then you have Frederic and Studnicka as two guys down below that I think could push those guys out of the lineup relatively. So DeBrusk, looking at a bounce back season for him, we'll see how he can do. Foligno, honestly, however he plays, Boston just needs a good third line center. Wagner, if he plays solid like he did last season, he won't be too bad. Lazar, coming from Buffalo, kind of, could be interesting as well. Nosek, as I said, very solid fourth line center, should be effective. As well as that, Eric Haula as well. He's kind of been down the past couple of years, but I think he can be good on this Boston Bruins core. He's not going to have that big of a role with the team. And then, of course, Frederic as well, physical forward, could push Haula out of that fourth line spot. And then Studnicka as well, you could argue he even makes the impact out of there as well instead of Lazar. You could definitely argue that. So that's your forward core. As for the blue line, you have Matt Grzelcyk and Charlie McAvoy. Then you have Mike Riley and Brandon Carlo. Then you have Derek Forbort and Connor Clifton. Then you have Moore and Zaboral as your two guys out of the top 6. So there you go. I love that blue line. The blue line is just one of my favorite things with Boston, especially that top 4 of Grzelcyk, McAvoy, Riley, Carlo. I love that top 4. I love the play in Grzelcyk. I love the defense in McAvoy. The offense in Carlo is pretty good. Riley is solid too. I like that. The third pairing I'm a bit on, but I think if Forbert can have a bounce back season out of just the bad seasons he's had with Winnipeg, I think he can be very solid. And then of course Moore, I don't expect him to make a big role in this Bruins lineup, but I think he still can be somewhat solid. And then Zaboral, depending on how he plays, he could be solid, he could be bad, It really depends, honestly. So anyways, that's it for the blue line. As for the goaltending, you have Linus Ullmark and David Swayman. David Swayman. Swayman, very solid backup goalie, should be very exciting to watch this coming season. Linus Ullmark, I've brought him up many times before here. I think he can be super good. I think he could be a top 10 goalie, honestly. And that might cause people to be like, "What? You're gonna put him over some of these guys that you don't have in your top 10?" But I think Ullmark honestly could very well be one, playing with this Bruins core. And when you look at their blue line, when you look at their offense, this team is ready, honestly. And I don't think they get enough credit. I feel like they have a lot of underrated players that nobody really talks about. And I mean, it's crazy because they're the Boston Bruins, and nobody really it's insane. So, you can take that what you will, but I really like the goaltending. I really like the defense, and I really like the offense. So not many teams gets this approval. I think only one other team's gotten this, the Rangers. So I'm going to give this team an approve. So let's look at this final question here facing the Boston Bruins. Do they make the playoffs? Can't imagine they don't. They probably finish second in their division behind Toronto. But the thing is with Toronto, Boston could very well push them out of that. It's absolutely possible. It's kind of a coin flip, honestly, with the Atlantic. The Bruins could be third for all we know, honestly. Some team could rise up out of nowhere and become that second seed spot. It is going to be so competitive this season that honestly, it really is a coin flip. And I mean that goes for the Metro too. I brought it up before. But this is the last team of the Eastern Conference we have to cover. We only have 2 more teams after this. We have the Arizona Coyotes and the Anaheim Ducks. So there you go. We're almost done with the previews. This is the last team for the Eastern Conference. We can start looking at division previews for those 2 divisions. But there you go. Anyways, thank you all for watching. For Ice Presley, I really do appreciate it. And I will see you guys in the next video. Adios.